everyone. Welcome to another episode of Rack and Roll, Future-Proofing Your Warehouse. I'm Ashley Feldpausch, your host. Today, we're exploring the topic of reimagining the modern supply chain, and I'm excited today to be joined by John Seidel. He's CEO and Managing Principal with New Course Group. John, it's a pleasure to have you on with us. Thanks for joining. Could you start by introducing yourself and giving us a little bit of background, and then we'll jump into our discussion.
That sounds great, Ashley. A pleasure to be here. Thanks for extending the invite. I've known the Tryon folks for a long time. Some of us grew up in the industry together, so it's a pleasure to talk with you folks. Appreciate that. A bit about my background. Got started in the warehouse management supply chain tech space back in the late 80s. Sold software all through the 90s, and then started my own systems integration consulting software shop back, I think it was 99. Built that up, had a lot of success in the space, did a lot of work around warehouse management, labor management, transportation, automation, engineering, et cetera. Ended up selling that business in 2007 and quasi-retired for a bit. Realized that was way too young and there was still a lot of fun to be had in this industry. So ever since, I've been doing work with a variety of entities, some of them being vendors in the space, so software vendors, automation vendors, systems integrators, whether it's a particular project I'm working on with them, but a lot of it's been around what's called growth and exit, strategy planning, et cetera. But then, probably 6, 8 years ago, started working with a variety of private equity, and the capital partner types have really become attracted to this space. And they've invested a lot, whether it's automation or software, and so have worked with some of the bigger private equity on developing, what's a thesis for investment in this space, what companies are investable, what technologies are investable, and I've had the pleasure of, orchestrating 5 different deals in the last 5 years between private equity and companies in our space. And so that's, I think there's a lot of growth in automation, and it's driven by all that money that is, finding its way into our sector. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. It's easy when you're in that to see those trends and how they're working. I also love that you mentioned you were quasi-retired and then came back, because I've been hearing a lot that when you're in the space, you're never going to get out. So maybe you just confirmed that for me.
Yeah, absolutely. This space is filled with a lot of good people, and you can't, I think I got started in '89, so coming up on 37 years in this space, and you make a lot of friends along the way. And
Yeah,
so if you enjoy what you do and you enjoy the people you do it with, why not stick around?
I
So.
agree. Yeah. So, like we just said, you've been in the supply chain space for a long time. Looking back over the last 10 years, what feels fundamentally different today? And why do you often hear people say things like, this isn't your grandfather's supply chain anymore? And what new capabilities have really changed the game in this space?
Yeah, good question, and we could probably spend the next 45 minutes talking about it. But some of the key areas that have really changed in the last 10 to 15 years, things like the rise of e-commerce, that has really accelerated changes within supply chain, changes within distribution and fulfillment operations. So that coupled with like the Amazon effect. So the Amazon effect, really has changed customers' expectations on what's acceptable for service levels around delivery and products together and multiple shipments. And so keeping up with that has really been, significant. But probably when you think about what's going on inside the warehouse, probably the biggest change has been the rise of flexible automation, as in robotics inside and specifically in motion robotics, not just robotic arms that are attached to a fixed platform, but robotic movements and in motion assets in the warehouse. I remember, I think it was 2012, was at a Modex, I believe. And Bruce Welty was there with the launch of Locus Robotics. And you look around, and he was the only entity that was representing robotics at that time for a big show like Modex. Well, now you go to a Modex or a ProMat, you can't walk or go anywhere without seeing robotics as far as the eye can see.
And
And so I
sometimes
think,
they're in the halls. You're walking in the aisles. They're everywhere.
right, yeah, they're everywhere, right? And so I think, that has significantly changed the landscape within our industry. And what's really changed is the approach as to how do I integrate robotics if I've got a legacy warehouse management systems. So, when you think about how WMSs got their roots, it was all about inventory management. So how do I manage my inventory better? And as that matured, then it became, well, I've got resources in the warehouse that I need to manage as well, meaning, humans. And then it became, well, how do I integrate some of this into traditional automation, which, conveyor, et cetera, and sortation systems? But with flexible automation, it really changed the game because you've got in motion assets that you need to track. So that, I think, led the way for what's a term called warehouse execution systems, WES. And so these WES systems are different than just warehouse management or another term, warehouse control systems, which is PLC logic, et cetera, for traditional. So how do I manage warehouse execution systems and how do I leverage their capabilities if I'm going to deploy multiple platforms of robotic solutions in my warehouse? And so the traditional WMS is all about last scan, next scan. And essentially, there's a black hole between what someone did on their last scan, and 3 minutes later, they show up and scan something else. That doesn't work if you've got a robotic platform. So you need to understand, how do I fill in that black hole and track in motion assets in a real time way? There's all kinds of things that come with that, like, what is a digital twin in the warehouse, and how do I create that digital twin of operations, not just inventory. So the ability for warehouse execution systems to really track and control what's going on from robots to simulation to traditional automation to inventory, labor orchestration, it's a big topic. And that's really, really a significant change from where we were 10 to 15 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. And with all that change, it makes you wonder why some transformation efforts really click and others don't. So when companies pursue automation or transformation projects, what truly makes them successful, and where do these initiatives most often stumble, and what can leaders do proactively to avoid those mistakes?
Well, yeah, this is a bit of a piggyback on the last question, which
Exactly.
is, 15 years ago when people did automation projects, it was a multi-year process, as in you took 18 months to do the design, to do the system setup, to figure out specifically what type of automation and where does that automation get deployed. And then it took another 18 months to actually get it implemented, get it sussed out, get it, fire tested, et cetera. That's a 3-year cycle. And I think because of the rapid rise of things like e-commerce, of cloud type applications that have a bearing on what's on-prem versus on edge versus in the cloud, all of those things have led to, we don't have 3 years to figure this out and get something operational. We've got to do something in the next 3 months. So flexible automation, i.e. robotics and in-motion assets, you can deploy in a much more finite way of understanding, here's a use case, here's technology that fits that use case, and it doesn't cost $30 million. We can start with a pilot for, something significantly less than 30 million. Maybe it's a, 1 to 3 million for a pilot, and it works well, or we tweak it and we find a different case for it. But you can start that way without a complete disruption of the overall or the entire operation in order to get automation going. So I think that's a significant area where there's been a lot of change in our space as well.
That's a great point. And for this next question, maybe this kind of answers it, but for leaders that are interested in automation but unsure where to start, how do you recommend they approach it? And what types of flexible automation are right for today's warehouses? And how do you help teams set realistic expectations around the outcomes and returns? And like you said, there are some options with some different types of robotics. But go ahead if you've got some more to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely, Ashley. And I think it depends on what type of company you are. So if you're a mid-tier company, meaning kind of it depends who you talk to as to what they define as mid-tier, but it's not a Fortune 1000 company, maybe somebody below that, where you don't have the, 40 to $70 million budget to plan out a fully automated facility, but yet you need automation because you feel the pressures of a constrained labor market. Customers are high, demanding that you reduce your cycle times for order fill. So you've got to get better at doing distribution, and you need to deploy some automation. There's an opportunity to leverage flexible automation in that type of sector without having to spend that type of money. But if you're a Fortune 100 company, you can set aside money around pilots. that you can plan what that use case is, and you can afford to make some mistakes as you fine tune what type of automation, or what type of flexible automation really fits your type of business. And then projects stumble for a variety of reasons. And usually it's because in what I've seen a lot. I've probably been in 1,000 warehouses and I've seen a lot of things. Generally, it can be a bad fit with you believe you have a use case and you pick the wrong technology for that use case. But probably the largest factor that organizations make, or the mistake they make, is they don't plan the appropriate amount of resources they're going to need to make that project successful. Oftentimes, organizations look at it and say, "Oh, here's the vendor will provide those resources." Well, the vendor works on their equipment or their software. The ability to actually integrate it in a meaningful, effective way into that operation is the responsibility of a third-party consultant or a customer. And for customers that don't put the appropriate resources on it, whether it's internal or external, they stumble and they deem it as a failed project. But generally, that responsibility falls on them because they didn't do the things they were supposed to do to make sure that technology worked.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing when you think about like being an expert in something in the world in general. It's like sometimes it's just better to call the expert. You might think you know, but then there's somebody out there that knows just a little bit more. And when it comes to a warehouse and lots of money, it helps to have an expert on your hand on hand. So
Absolutely. And yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, what I was going to add is that some of the bigger companies have realized that deployment of technology really falls on them, and they actually they create, professional project management offices, they create internal systems integration groups that lead that, but that's Fortune 100 companies. And so, organizations that are in that mid tier, they really, you can be penny wise and pound foolish. But the reality is bringing in experts, to your point, Ashley, to really help orchestrate and drive the proper success of these projects. It's crucial for mid-tier organizations to recognize that early and bring in the right experts to make that happen.
Definitely. Yeah. And like you said earlier, we talked when you're talking a little bit about your background that we've seen a massive surge in automation over the last 5 to 6 years. So, what is driving that acceleration, and how have labor challenges, long-term industry forecasts, and venture and private equity investments fueled innovation in the space? And I know you mentioned a little bit above, but do you have more to add on that?
Yeah, I think some of those factors are obviously a labor shortage. In some of the things that the requirement for customers to do more with less, because if you've ever worked in a warehouse, it's not glamorous and it's hard work. And so finding people that are willing to put that level of effort in, I think over the years and over the decades has waned. And so being able to develop automation that can do the work. So if you had 100 people in 15 years ago, being able to do that same level of volume with 40 people is kind of the direction of where the industry is headed. And so automation is a really, really key aspect of making that successful and driving the efficiency of those operations. And that's where I think all of that was coming to a head when COVID hit. And so, my wife has said to me, when I married her, she's like, supply chain, what's that? Well, supply chain was, dinner conversation for everybody during COVID because it was a great scapegoat for organizations that couldn't get product to the right place at the right time at the right price. Oh, supply chain.
Yeah.
And so I think the private equity and capital partner types were what the industry refers to as chasing heat. It's like, oh, I've got to buy an asset in the supply chain space because it's so important and it's a high priority. And so that obviously drove a lot of big projects, a lot of automation deployment, a lot of design builds for new buildings. It's obviously cooled some since then, but the reliance and the understanding of how automation can really change the efficiency and drive a lot of costs out of your operations as you grow and continue to take the business to different levels. That hasn't changed. But the finding the right piece of automation or the right flexible automation to fit your use case is still a work in process that a lot of organizations are going through.
Absolutely. It feels like things have really hit a turning point. And I agree. It feels like it kind of started during that 2020 era but it's been very cool to see, but also I can imagine that people are taking precaution and you know, approach it smartly when you are ready. So thank you everybody
Absolutely.
for joining us on this edition of Rack and Roll, and thank you, John. Hope you found today's discussion on reimagining the modern supply chain valuable. If you have any questions or would like to learn more, please feel free to reach out. Our contact information is provided in the description below. Until next time, stay innovative and keep future-proofing your warehouse. Bye.